Hello, my darlings. Welcome back to the Gentleman Psychic. We are continuing to read The Sorrows of Satan. But if you will just mind me for 1 second, I'm going to go right over here and share you on my Facebook. I hope everyone is doing well. Let's see. Oh, good. It says I'm live, and we're going to share that one. Copy the link. It's wonderful that I have two machines, because before I was doing everything on my phone, and I find that this is actually better this way. It's amazing. It is really phenomenal to be a modern man about the world. Go down, let's see, create a post. And I'm going to paste here. Hi, Malika. Hi, Charlie. I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm very well, thank you, Rocket Cube. Mary Jane King, good evening. Morella Valenwood, good evening, good evening. I'm going to reading The Sorrows of Satan. It's a modern world, you know, and being in a modern world, you have to kind of play the game. So I'll publish that one there, and now I'm going to share that one so that I can cross traffic. You know, it's one of those things. Okay, let me see. Now, posts. There we go. We'll share that one. Right post. Newsfeed. Join me for story time. Now, social media done. Now we get to talk about important things like reading books. But before we get into that, I want to tell you, I still have not gotten out the videos that I'm supposed to be working on. I have been really, really busy with the move and with everything going on. There's a lot going on. But I'm slowly getting back into the groove of things. I'm getting things finally organized. My drawing room is looking good. My morning room is looking good. My office is not looking good. My bedroom is looking good. My dining room is not looking good. My kitchen is, that's the kitchen. So, you know, there's that. What else can I tell you? Oh, yes, you can actually follow my friend Wayne David Hand. He's got this beautiful mansion, a 30-room mansion in Pennsylvania, in Schaefferstown, and we're going to be, I'm working to help make it more well known. So if you follow Heidelberg Hall 1876. So if you follow that one, you'll be able to see the updates and the restoration on my friend's estate. And then we're opening it up to the paranormal community. We're trying to get investigators to come in. The place is haunted, but beyond which it is beautiful. And I think that is almost more important than being haunted. I think it's good to be both, but you know, I have my druthers. Oh, before I actually start reading The Sorrow of Satan, I brewed myself a nice pot of tea at 10 o'clock in the evening, because why not, right? It's no wonder I don't get to bed until late, but one little sip. Oh, that's hot. It's a really good tea too. It's Earl Grey, and it has some vanilla in it, and it's got some black currant in it. It's very good. It's delightful. Just a little hot. You'd think someone who enjoys those things that are satanic would enjoy a little bit more warm, but I'm going to let it cool ever so much. Hello, Dave Abler. Hello to Detroit. Hello, Lisa. Good to see you. Malika, my mom wants to meet you one day. She really likes you. I would be absolutely honored. All right, lovelies. So let's talk a little bit about our story. Last week, we were introduced to the main character, who we discover is, how do I put it delicately, poor. very poor. He is so very poor that he has no heat and he lives in a little hovel, a little one room he's renting, and he hasn't paid his landlady. But to his surprise, he received £50 note from his friend, and then he just heard that he has inherited, oh goodness, millions of pounds in 1895. So he's very, very wealthy. And there is one little caveat, and that is that he must meet with this certain fellow named Lucian. Where we left off is where he was just about to meet this strange individual. Shall we continue? I saw that. Okay, here we go. The Sorrows of Satan, Chapter 3. The door opened, and from the dense obscurity enshrouding me, I could just perceive a tall, shadowy figure standing on the threshold. I remember well the curious impression the mere outline of the scarcely discerned form made upon me even then, suggesting at the first glance such a stately majesty of height and bearing as at once riveted my attention. So much so, indeed, that I scarcely heard my landlady's introductory words. "A gentleman to see you, sir," words that were quickly interrupted by a murmur of dismay at finding the room in a total darkness. "Well, to be sure, the lamp must have gone out," she exclaimed. Then, addressing the personage she had ushered thus far, she added, "I'm afraid Mr. Tempest isn't in after all, sir, though I certainly saw him about half an hour ago. If you don't mind waiting here a minute, I'll fetch a light and see if he has left any message on his table." She hurried away, and though I knew that that of course I ought to speak, a singular and quite inexplicable perversity of humor kept me silent and unwilling to declare my presence. Meanwhile, the tall stranger advanced a pace or two, and a rich voice with a ring of ironical amusement in it called me by name. "Geoffrey Tempest? Are you there?" Why could I not answer? The strangest and most unnatural obscenity stiffened my tongue and concealed the gloom of my forlorn literary den. I still held my peace. The majestic figure drew nearer, till the height and breadth that seemed to suddenly overshadow me. And once again the voice called, "Geoffrey Tempest, are you there?" For very shame's sake, I could hold out no longer, and, with a determined effort, I broke the extraordinary dumb spell that had held me like a coward in silent hiding, and came forward boldly to confront my visitor. "Yes, I am here," I said, "and being here, I am ashamed to give you such a welcome as this. You are Prince Ramirez, of course. I have just read your note, which prepared me for your visit, but I was hoping that my landlady, finding the room in darkness, would conclude I was out and show you downstairs again. You see, I am perfectly frank." "You are indeed," returned the stranger, his deep tones still vibrating with the silvery clang of veiled satire. "So frank that I cannot fail to understand you. Briefly, and without courtesy, you resent my visit this evening, and I wish I had not come." This open declaration of my mood sounded so brusque that I made haste to deny it, though I knew it to be true. Truth, even in trifles, always seems unpleasant. "Pray do not think me so churlish," I said. "The fact is, I only opened your letter a few minutes ago, and before I could make any arrangements to receive you, the lamp went out, with the awkward result that I am forced to greet you in this unsociable darkness, which is almost too dense to shake hands in. Shall we try?" my visitor inquired with a sudden softening of accent that gave his words a singular charm. Here is my hand. If yours has any friendly instinct in it, the twain will meet, quite blindly and without guidance. I at once extended my hand, and it was instantly clasped in a warm and somewhat masterful manner. At that instant, a light flashed on the scene. My landlady entered, bearing what she called her best lamp, alit, and set it on the table. I believe she uttered some exclamation of surprise at seeing me. She may have said anything or nothing, I do not hear or heed so entirely. Was I amazed and fascinated by the appearance of the man whose long, slender hand still held mine. I am myself an average good height, but he was fully half a head taller than I, if not more than that, and as I looked straightly at him, I thought I had never seen so much beauty and intellectuality combined in the outward personality of any human being. The finely shaped head denoted both power and wisdom, and was nobly poised on such shoulders as might have befitted a Hercules. The countenance was a pure oval and singularly pale, this complexion intensifying the almost fiery brilliancy of the full dark eyes, which had in them a curious and wonderfully attractive look of mingled mirth and misery. The mouth was perhaps the most telling feature in this remarkable face. Set in the perfect curve of beauty, it was yet firm, determined, and not too small, thus escaping effeminacy. And I noted that in repose it expressed bitterness, disdain, and even cruelty. With the light of a smile upon it, it signified, or seemed to signify, something more subtle than any passion to which we can give a name. And already, with the rapidity of lightning flash, I caught myself wondering what a mystic, undeclared something might be. At a glance, I comprehended these primary details of my new acquaintance, eminently repossessing appearance, and when my hand dropped from his close grasp, I felt as if I had known him all my life. And now, face to face with him, in the bright lamplight, I remembered my actual surroundings, the bare, cold room, the lack of fire, the black soot that sprinkled the nearly carpetless floor, my own shabby clothes, and deplorable aspect as compared with this regal-looking individual who carried the visible evidence of wealth upon him in the superb Russian sables that lined and bordered his long overcoat, which he now partially unfastened and threw open with a carelessly imperial air, the while he regarded me, smiling. "I know I have come at an awkward moment," he said. "I always do. It is my peculiar misfortune. Well-bred people never intrude where they are not wanted, and in this particular, I'm afraid my manners leave much to be desired. Try to forgive me if you can, for the sake of this." And he held out a letter addressed to me in my friend Carrington's familiar handwriting. "And permit me to sit down while you read my credentials." He took a chair and seated himself. I'll let the train go by. "Try to forgive me if you can, and for this sake." And he held out a letter addressed to me in my friend Carrington's familiar handwriting. "And permit me to sit while you read my credentials." He took a chair and seated himself. I observed his handsome face and easy attitude with renewed admiration. "No credentials are necessary," I said with all the cordiality I now really felt. "I have already had a letter from Carrington in which he speaks of you in the highest and most grateful terms. But the fact is, well, really, Prince, you must excuse me if I seem confused or astonished. I had expected to see quite an old man." And I broke off, somewhat embarrassed by the keen glance of the brilliant eyes that met mine so fixedly. No one is old, my dear sir, nowadays, he declared lightly. Even the grandmothers and grandfathers are friskier at 50 than they were at 15. One does not talk of age at all now in polite society. It is ill-bred, even coarse. Indecent things are unmentionable age. Age has become an indecent thing. It is therefore avoided in conversation. You expected to see an old man, you say? Well, you are not disappointed. I am old. In fact, you have no idea how very old I am. I laughed at this piece of absurdity. Why, you're younger than I said. Or if not, you look it. Ah, my looks belie me, he returned gaily. I am like several of the most noted fashionable beauties, much riper than I seem. But come, read the introductory missive I have brought you. I shall not be satisfied till you do. Thus requested, and wishing to prove myself as courteous as I had hitherto been brusque, I at once opened my friend's note and read as follows. Dear Geoffrey, the bearer of this Prince Ximenes is a very distinguished scholar and gentleman, allied by descent to one of the oldest families in Europe, or, for that matter, in the world. You, as a student and lover of ancient history, will be interested to know that his ancestors were originally the princes of Chaldea, who afterwards settled in Tyre. From thence they went to Etruria, and there continued through many centuries, the last scion of the house being the very gifted and genial personage who, as my good friend, I have the pleasure of commending to your kindest regard. Certain troublous and overpowering circumstances have forced him into exile from his native province and deprived him of a great part of his possessions, so that he is to a considerable extent a wanderer on the face of earth, and has traveled far and seen much, and has a wide experience of men and things. He is a poet and a musician of great skill. And though he occupies himself with the arts solely for his own amusement, I think you will find his practical knowledge of literary matters eminently useful to you in your difficult career. I must not forget to add that in all matters scientific he is an absolute master. Wishing you both a cordial friendship, I am, dear Geoffrey, yours sincerely, John Carrington. The signature of Boffles was evidently being deemed out of place this time, and somehow I was foolishly vexed at this omission. There seemed to be something formal and stiff in the letter, almost as if it had been written to dictation and under pressure. What gave me this idea, I know not. I glanced furtively at my silent companion. He caught my stray look and returned with curiously grave fixity. Fearing lest my momentary vague distrust of him had been reflected in my eyes, I made haste to speak. This letter, Prince, adds to my shame and regret that I should have greeted you in so churlish a manner this evening. No apology can condone my rudeness, but you cannot imagine how mortified I felt, and still feel, to be compelled to receive you in this miserable den. It is not at all the sort of place in which I should have liked to welcome you. And I broke off with a renewed sense of irritation, remembering how actually rich I now was, and that in spite of this I was obliged to seem poor. Meanwhile, the prince waved aside my remarks with a light gesture of his hand. Why be mortified? He demanded. Rather be proud that you can dispense with vulgar appurtenances of luxury. Genius thrives in a garret and dies in a palace. Is not that the generally accepted theory? A rather worn out and mistaken one, I consider, I replied. Genius might like to try the effect of a palace for once. It usually dies of starvation. Ah, true. But in thus dying, think how many fools it afterwards fattens. There is an all-wise providence in this, my dear sir. Schubert perished of want. But see what large profits all the music publishers have made since out of his compositions. It is but a most beautiful dispensation of nature that honest folk should be sacrificed in order to provide for the sustenance of knaves. He laughed, and I looked at him in little surprise. His remark touched so near my own opinions that I wondered whether he were in jest or in earnest. You speak sarcastically, of course, I said. You do not really believe what you say. Oh, I do. Oh, do I not? He returned with a flash in his eyes that was almost lightning-like in its intensity. If I could not believe the teaching of my own experience, what would be left of me? I always realized the needs must of things. How does the old maxim go? Needs must when the devil drives. There is really no possible contradiction to offer to the accuracy of that statement. The devil drives the world whip in hand, and oddly enough, considering that some belated folk still fancy there is a God somewhere, succeeds in managing his team with extraordinary ease. His brow clouded, and the bitter lines about his mouth deepened and hardened. Anon, he laughed again, lightly, and continued. But let us not moralize. Morals sicken the soul, both in church and out of it. Every sensible man hates to be told what he could be and what he won't be. I am here to make friends with you, if you permit, and to put an end to ceremony. Will you accompany me back to my hotel, where I have ordered supper? By this time, I had become indescribably fascinated by his easy manner, handsome presence, and mellifluous voice. The satirical turn of his humor suited mine. I felt we should get on well together, and my first annoyance at being discovered by him in such poverty-stricken circumstances somewhat abated. With pleasure, I replied, but first of all, you must allow me to explain matters a little. You have heard a good deal about my affairs from my friend John Carrington, and I know from his private letter to me that you have come here out of pure kindness and goodwill. For that generous intention, I thank you. I know you expected to find a poor wretch of a literary man struggling with the direst circumstances and of disappointment and poverty, and a couple of hours ago you would have amply fulfilled that expectation, but now things have changed. I have received news which completely alters my position. In fact, I have had a very great and remarkable surprise this evening. An agreeable one, I trust? Interposed my companion suavely. I smiled. Judge for yourself. And I handed him the lawyer's letter which informed me of the suddenly acquired fortune. He glanced through it rapidly, then folded and returned it to me with a courteous bow. I suppose I should congratulate you, he said, and I do. Though, of course, this wealth which seems to content you, to me appears a mere trifle. It can be quite conveniently run through and exhausted in about 8 years or less. Therefore, it does not provide absolute immunity from care. To be rich, really rich in my case of the word, one should have about $1 million a year. Then one might reasonably hope to escape the workhouse. He laughed, and I stared at him stupidly, not knowing how to take his words, whether as truth or idle boasting. 5 millions of money, a mere trifle? He went on without apparently noticing my amazement. The inexhaustible greed of man, my dear sir, can never be satisfied. If he is not consumed by desire for one thing, he is for another, and his tastes are generally expensive. A few pretty and unscrupulous women, for example, would soon relieve you of your 5 millions in the purchase of jewels alone. Horse racing would do it still more quickly. No, you are not rich. You are still poor. Only your needs are no longer so pressing as they were, And in this, I confess, myself somewhat disappointed, for I came to you hoping to do a good turn to someone for once in my life, and to play the foster father to a rising genius. And here I am, forestalled as usual. It is a singular thing, do you know, but nevertheless a fact that whenever I have had any particular intentions towards a man, I am always forestalled. It is rather hard upon me. He broke off and raised his head in a listening attitude. What is that? He asked. It was the violinist next door playing a well-known Ave Maria, I told him, sir. Dismal. Very dismal, he said with contemptuous shrug. I hate all that kind of mawkish, devotional stuff. Well, millionaire as you are, and acknowledged lion of society as you shortly will be, there is no objection, I hope, to the proposed supper, and perhaps a music hall afterwards, if you feel inclined. What do you say? He clapped me on the shoulder cordially and looked straight into my face. Those wonderful eyes of his, suggestive of both tears and fire, fixed me with a clear, masterful gaze that completely dominated me. I made no attempt to resist the singular attraction which now possessed me for this man whom I had just met. The sensation was too strong and too pleasant to be combated. Only for one moment more I hesitated, looking down at my shabby attire. I am not fit to accompany you, Prince, I said. I look more like a tramp than a millionaire. He glanced at me and smiled. Upon my life, so you do, he averred. But be satisfied you are in the respect very like many other Croesus. It is only the poor and proud who take the trouble to dress well. They and their naughty ladies generally monopolize tasteful and becoming attire. An ill-fitting coat can often adorn the back of a prime minister, and if you see a woman clad in clothes, vilely cut and colored, you may be sure she is eminently virtuous, renowned for good works, and probably a duchess. He rose, drawing his sables about him. What matter of the coat, if the purse be full? He continued gaily. Let it once be properly paragraphed in the papers that you are a millionaire, and double some enterprising tailor will invent a tempest, ulster-coloured softly like your present garb, an artistic mildewy green. And now, come along. Your solicitor's communication should have given you a good appetite, or it is not so valuable as it seems. And I want you to do justice to my supper. I have my own chef with me, and he is not without skill. I hope, by the way, you will at least do me this much service. That pending legal discussion and settlement of your affairs, you will let me be your banker. This offer was made with such an air of courteous delicacy and friendship that I could do no more than accept it gratefully, as it relieved me from the temporary embarrassment. I hastily wrote a few lines to my landlady, telling her I would receive the money owing to her by post next day, then thrusting my rejected manuscript, my only worldly possession, into my coat pocket, I extinguished the lamp, and with the new friend I had so suddenly gained, I left my dismal lodgings and all its miserable associations forever. I little thought the day would come when I should look back to time spent in that small, mean room as the best period of my life. When I should regard the bitter poverty I then endured as the stern but holy angel meant to guide me to the highest and noblest attainment. Then I should pray desperately with wild tears to be as I was then rather than I am now. Is it well or ill for us, I wonder, that the future is hidden from our knowledge? Should we steer our ways clearer from evil if we knew its result? It is a doubtful question, At any rate, my ignorance for the moment was indeed bliss. I went joyfully out of the dreary house where I had lived so long among disappointments and difficulties, turning my back upon it with such sense of relief as could never be expressed in the words. And the last thing I heard as I passed into the street with my companion was a plaintive, long-drawn wail of a minor melody, which seemed to be sent after me like a parting cry by the unknown and invisible player of the violin. Chapter 4. Outside, the prince's carriage waited, drawn by two spirited black horses, caparisoned in silver, magnificent thoroughbreds which pawed the ground and champed their bits, impatient of delay. A sight of his master, the smart footman in attendance, threw the door open. Touching his hat respectfully, we stepped in, I preceding my companion at his expressed desire, and I sank back among the easy cushions. I felt the complacent consciousness of luxury and the power to such an extent that it seemed as if I had left my days of adversity already a long way behind me. Hunger and happiness disputed my sensations between them, and I was in that vague, light-headed condition common to long fasting, in which nothing seemed absolutely tangible or real. I knew I should not properly grasp the solid truth of my wonderful good luck till my physical needs were satisfied, and I was, so to speak, once more in a naturally balanced bodily condition. At present, my brain was in a whirl. My thoughts were all dim and disconnected, and I appeared to myself to be in some whimsical dream from which I should wake up directly. The carriage rolled on rubber-tired wheels and made no noise as it went. One could only hear the even rapid trot of the horses. By and by, I saw in the semi-darkness my new friend's brilliant eyes fixed upon me with a curiously intent expression. "Do you not feel whirled already at your feet?" he queried, half playfully, half ironically, "like a football waiting to be kicked? It is such an absurd world, you know, so easily moved. Wise men in all ages have done their best to make it less ridiculous, with no result, inasmuch as it continues to prefer folly to wisdom. A football, or let us say, a shuttlecock among worlds, ready to be tossed up anyhow and anywhere, provided the battledore of gold." "You speak a trifle bitterly, Prince," I said, "but no doubt you have had a wide experience among men." "I have," he returned with emphasis. "My kingdom is a vast one." "You are a ruling power, then?" I exclaimed with some astonishment. "Yours is not a title of honor only?" "Oh, as your rules of aristocracy go, it is a mere title of honor," he replied quickly. "When I say that my kingdom is a vast one, I mean that I rule wherever men obey the influence of wealth. From this point of view, am I wrong in calling my kingdom vast? Is it not almost boundless?" "I perceive you are a cynic," I said, "yet surely you believe that there are some things wealth cannot buy, honor and virtue, for example?" He surveyed me with a whimsical smile. "I suppose honor and virtue do exist," he answered. "And when they are existent, of course, they cannot be bought. But my experience has taught me that I can always buy everything. If sentiments called honor and virtue by the majority of men are the most shifty things imaginable, set sufficient cash down, and they become bribery and corruption in the twinkling of an eye. Curious, very curious. I confess I found a case of unpurchasable integrity once, but only once. I may find it again, though I consider the chance a very doubtful one. Now to revert to myself. Pray do not imagine I am playing the humbug with your passing myself off under the bogus title. I am a bona fide prince, believe me, and of such descent as none of your oldest families can boast. But my dominions are long since broken up, and my former subjects dispersed among all nations. Anarchy, nihilism, disruption, and political troubles generally compel me to be rather reticent concerning my affairs. Money, I fortunately have in plenty, and with that, I pave my way some day when we are better acquainted. You shall know more of my private history. I have various other names and titles besides that on my card, but I keep to the simplest of them, because most people are such bunglers of the pronunciation of foreign names. My intimate friends generally drop my title and call me Lucio simply. Is that your Christian name? I began. Oh, certainly not at all. I have no Christian name, he interrupted swiftly and with anger. There is no such thing as Christian name in my composition. He spoke with such impatience that for the moment I was at a loss for reply. At last, indeed, I murmured vaguely. He burst out laughing. Indeed. That's all you can find to say. Indeed. And again, indeed. The word Christian vexes me. There is no such being alive. You are not a Christian. No one is really. People pretend to be, and in so damnable an act of feigning more blasphemous than any fallen fiend, now I make no pretense of the kind. I have only one faith, and that is a profound and awful one, he said in thrilling tones, and the worst of it is that it is true as the workings of the universe, but of that hereafter it will do to talk of when we feel low-spirited and wish to converse of things grim and ghastly. At present, here we are at our destination, and the chief consideration of our lives, it is the chief consideration of most men's lives, must be to the excellence of, or non-excellence of our food. The carriage stopped, and we descended. At first sight of the black horses and silver trappings, the porter of the hotel and 2 or 3 other servants rushed out to attend upon us, but the prince passed into the hall without noticing any of them, and addressed himself to a sober-looking individual in black, his own private valet, who came forward to meet him with a profound situation. I murmured something about wishing to engage a room for myself in the hotel. Oh, my man will see to that for you, he said lightly. The house is not full. At any rate, all the best rooms are taken, and of course you want one of the best. A staring waiter, who up at the moment had been noting my shabby clothes with that peculiar air of contempt commonly displayed by insolent menials to those whom they imagine are poor, overheard these words, and suddenly, changing the derisive expression of his foxy face, bowed obsequiously as I passed. A thrill of disgust ran through me, mingled with certain angry triumph. The hypocritical reflex of his low fellow's countenance was, I knew, a true epitome of what I should find similarly reflected in the manner and attitude of all polite society. For there the estimate of worth is no higher than a common servant's estimate, and is taken solely from the money standard. If you are poor and dress shabbily, you are thrust aside and ignored, but if you are rich, you may wear shabby clothes as much as you like. You are still courted and flattered and invited everywhere, though you may be the greatest fool alive or the worst blackguard unhung. With vague thoughts such as those flitting over my head, I followed my host to his room. He occupied nearly a whole wing of the hotel, having a large drawing room, dining room, and a study in suite, fitted up in the most luxurious manner, besides bedroom, bathroom, and dressing room, with all of the rooms adjoining for his valet and 2 extra personal attendants. The table was laid for supper, and glittered with the costliest glass, silver, and china, being furthermore adorned by baskets of the most exquisite fruit and flowers, and in a few moments we were seated. The prince's valet acted as head waiter, and I noticed that now this man's face, seen in the full light of the electric lamps, seemed very dark and unpleasant, even sinister in expression, but in the performance of his duties, he was unexceptionable, being quick, attentive, and deferential, so much so that I inwardly reproached myself for taking an instinctive dislike to him. His name was Amiel, and I found myself involuntarily watching his movements. They were so noiseless. His very step suggested the steadily gliding of a cat or a tiger. He was assisted in his work by 2 other attendants who served his subordinates and who were equally active and well-trained. And presently I found myself enjoying the choicest meal I had tasted for many and many and many a long day, flavored with such wine and as connoisseurs might be apt to dream of, but never succeeded in finding. I began to feel perfectly at ease, and talked with freedom and confidence and strong attraction I had for my new friend, deepening with every moment I passed in his company. "Will you continue your literary career now you have this little fortune left you?" he inquired. Then, when at the close of the supper, Amiel set the choicest cognac and cigars before us and respectfully withdrew. "Do you think you'll care to go on with it?" "Certainly I shall," I replied, "if only for the fun of the thing. You see, with the money, I can force my name into the notice, whether the public like it or not. No newspaper refuses paying advertisements." "True, but may not inspiration refuse to flow from a full purse and an empty head?" This remark provoked me not a little. "Do you consider me empty-headed?" I asked with some vexation. "Not at present. My dear Tempest, do not let either the Tokay we have been drinking or the cognac we are going to drink speak for you in such haste. I assure you, I do not think you empty-headed. On the contrary, your head, I believe, from what I have heard, has been and is full of ideas, excellent ideas, original ideas, which the world of conventional criticism does not want. But whether these ideas will continue to germinate in your brain, or whether, with the full purse, they will cease, is now the question. Great originality and inspiration, strange to say, seldom endow the millionaire. Inspiration is supposed to come from above, money from below. In your case, however, both originality and inspiration may continue to flourish and bring forth fruit. I trust they may. It often happens, nevertheless, that when bags of money fall to the lot of aspiring genius, God departs and the devil walks in. Have you ever heard that? Never, I answered, smiling. Well, of course the saying is foolish, and sounds doubly ridiculous in this age when people believe in neither God nor devil. It implies, however, that one must choose an up or a down. Genius is the up, money is the down. You cannot fly and grovel at the same instant. The possession of money is not likely to cause a man to grovel, I said. It is the one thing necessary to strengthen his soaring powers and lift him to the greatest heights. You think so? And my host lit his cigar with a grave and preoccupied air. Then I'm afraid you don't know much about what I shall call natural physics. What belongs to earth tends earthwards. Surely you realize that. Gold most strictly belongs to earth. You dig it out of the ground, you handle it and dispose of it in solid wedges or bars. It is a substantial metal enough. Genius belongs to nobody. Nobody knows where. You cannot dig it up or pass it on. 1 second. I'll call that person back. It is substantial. Oh, genius belongs to nobody knows where. You cannot dig it up or pass it on or do anything with it except stand and marvel. It is a rare visitant and capricious as the wind, and generally makes sad havoc among the conventionalities of men. It is, as I said, an upper thing, beyond earthly smells and savors. And those who have it always live in unknown high latitudes. But money is perfectly level commodity, level with the ground. When you have much of it, you come down solidly on your flat soles, and down you stay. I laughed. Upon my word, you preach very eloquently against wealth, I said. You yourself are unusually rich. Are you sorry for it? No, I am not sorry, because being sorry would be no use, he returned, and I never waste my time. But I am telling you the truth. Genius and great riches hardly ever pull together. Now, I, for example, you cannot imagine what great capabilities I had once, a long time ago before I became my own master. And you have them still, I'm sure, I averred, looking expressly at his noble head and fine eyes. The strange, subtle smile I had noticed once or twice before lightened his face. Ah, you mean to compliment me once or twice? You mean to compliment me, he said. You like my looks. Many people do. Yet after all, there is nothing so deceptive as one's outward appearance. The reason of this is that as soon as childhood is past, we are always pretending to be what we are not, and thus, with constant practice from our youth up, we manage to make our physical frames complete disguises for our actual selves. It is really wise and clever of us, for hence each individual is so much flesh wall, through which neither friend nor enemy can spy. Every man is a solitarily soul imprisoned in a self-made den. When he is quite alone, he knows and frequently hates himself. Sometimes he even gets afraid of the gaunt and murderous monster he keeps hidden behind his outwardly pleasant body mask, and hastens to forget his frightful existence in drink and debauchery. That is what I do occasionally. You would not think it of me, would you? Never, I replied quickly, for something in his voice and aspect moved me strangely. You belie yourself and wrong your own nature. He laughed softly. Perhaps I do, he said carelessly. This much you may believe of me, that I am no worse than most men. Now to return to the subject of your literary career. You have written a book, you say. Well, publish it and see the result. If you only make one hit, that is something, and there are ways of arranging that one hit shall be made. What is your story about? I hope it is improper. It certainly is not, I replied warmly. It's a romance dealing with the noblest forms of life and the highest ambitions. I wrote it with the intention of elevating and purifying the thoughts of my readers, and wished if I could do the comfort those who had suffered loss or sorrow. Jimenez smiled compassionately. Ah, it won't do, he interrupted. I assure you it won't. It doesn't fit the age. It might go down, possibly, if you could give the first night of it, as it were, the critics like, One of my most intimate friends, Henry Irving, a first night combined with an excellent supper and any amount of good drinks going. Otherwise, it's no use. It is to succeed by itself. It must not attempt to be literature. It must simply be indecent, as indecent as you can make it. Without offending advanced women, that is giving you a good wide margin. Put in as much as you can about sexual matters and the bearing of children and brief discourse of men and women simply as cattle who exist merely for breeding purposes, and your success will be enormous. There's not a critic living who won't applaud you. There's not a schoolgirl of 15 who will not gloat over your pages in the silence of her virginal bedroom. Such a flash of withering derision darted from his eyes as startled me. I could find no words to answer him. With a moment he went on. What put it into your head, my dear Tempest, to write a book dealing with, as you say, the noblest forms of life? There are no noble forms of life left on this planet. It is all low and commercial. Man is a pygmy, and his aims are pygmy like himself. For noble forms of life seek other worlds. There are others. Then again, people don't want their thoughts erased or purified in the novels they read for amusement. They go to church for that and get very bored during the process. And why should you wish to comfort folks who, out of their own sheer stupidity, generally get into trouble? They wouldn't comfort you. They would not give you 6 pence to save you from starvation. My good fellow, leave your quixotism behind you with your poverty. Live your life to yourself. If you do anything for others, they will only treat you with the blackest ingratitude. So, take my advice and don't sacrifice your own personal interests for any consideration whatsoever. He rose from the table as he spoke and stood with his back to the bright fire, smoking his cigar tranquilly. And I gazed at his handsome figure and face with just the faintest thrill of pained doubt darkening my admiration. If you were not so good-looking, I should call you a heartless, I said at last, but your features are direct contradiction to your words. You have not really that indifference to human nature which you strive to assume. Your whole aspect betokens a generosity of spirit which you cannot conquer if you would. Besides, are you not always trying to do good? He smiled. Always. That is, I am always at work, endeavoring to gratify every man's desire. Whether that is good of me or bad remains to be proved. Men's wants are almost illimitable. The only thing none of them ever seem to wish for, so far as I am concerned, is to cut my acquaintance. Why, of course not. After once meeting you, how could they? I said, laughing as absurdly of the suggestion. He gave me a whimsical side look. Their desires are not always virtuous, he remarked, turning to flick off the ash of his cigar into the grate. But of course, you do not gratify them in your vices. In their vices, I rejoined, still laughing. That would be playing the part of the benefactor somewhat too thoroughly. Ah, now I see we shall flounder in the quicksands of theory if we go any further, he said. You forget, my dear fellow, that nobody can decide as to what is vice or what is virtue. These things are chameleon-like and take different colors in different countries. Abraham had 2 or 3 wives and several concubines, and he was the very soul of virtue, according to sacred lore, whereas my Lord Tom Noddy in London today has 1 wife and several concubines, and is really very much like Abraham in other particulars, yet he is considered a very dreadful person. Who shall decide when doctors disagree? Let's drop the subject, as we shall never settle it. What shall we do with the rest of the evening? There is a stout-limbed, shrewd wench at the Tivoli, dancing her way into the affections of rickety little Duke. Shall we go and watch at the admirable contortions with which she is wriggling into a fixed position among the English aristocracy? Or are you tired? Would you prefer a long night's rest? To tell you the truth, I was thoroughly fatigued, and mentally, as well as physically, worn out with the excitements of the day. My head was too heavy with wine to which I had so long been unaccustomed. Upon my word, I think I would rather go to bed than anything, I confessed. But what about my room? Oh, Amiel will have attended to that for you. We'll ask him. And he touched the bell. His valet instantly appeared. Have you got a room for Mr. Tempest? Yes, Your Excellency. An apartment in this corridor, almost facing Your Excellency's suite. It is not well furnished as might be, but I have made it as comfortable as I can for the night. Thank you very much, I said. I am greatly obliged to you. Amiel bowed deferentially. Thank you, sir. He retired, and I moved to bid my host good night. He took my proffered hand and held it in his, looking at me curiously the while. I like you, Geoffrey Tempest, he said, and because I like you, I think there are the makings of something higher than the mere earthly brute in you. I'm going to make you what you may perhaps consider rather a singular proposition. It is this, that if you don't like me, say so at once, and we will part now, before we have time to know anything more of each other, and I will endeavor not to cross your path again unless you seek me out. But if, on the contrary, you do like me, if you find something in my humor or turn of mind congenial to your own disposition, give me your promise that you will be my friend and companion for a while, say a few months at any rate. I can take you into the best society and introduce you to the prettiest women in Europe, as well as the most brilliant men. I know them all, and I believe I can be useful to you. But if there is the smallest aversion to me lurking in the depths of your nature, here he paused, then resumed with extraordinary solemnity, in God's name, give it full way and let me go, because I swear to you in all sober earnest that I am not what I seem. Strongly impressed by his strange look and stranger manner, I hesitated one moment, and on that moment, had I but known it hung my future, it was true. I had felt a passing shadow of distrust and repulsion for his fascinating yet cynical man, and he seemed to have guessed it. But now every suspicion of him vanished from my mind, and I clasped his hand with renewed heartiness. My dear fellow, your warning comes too late, I said mirthfully. Whatever you are, or whatever you choose to think you are, I find you most sympathetic to my disposition, and I consider myself most fortunate in knowing you. My old friend Carrington has indeed done me a good turn in bringing us together, and I assure you I shall be proud of your companionship. You seem to take a perverse delight in running yourself down, but you know the old adage, the devil is not so black as he is painted. And that is true, he murmured dreamily. Poor devil. His faults are no doubt much exaggerated by the clergy. And so we are to be friends? I hope so. I shall not be the first to break the compact. His dark eyes rested upon me thoughtfully, yet there seemed to be a lurking smile in them as well. Compact is a good word, he said. So, a compact we will consider it. I meant to improve your material fortunes. You can dispense with that aid now, but I think I can still be of service in pushing you on society. And love, of course. You will fall in love if you have not already done so, have you? Not I answered quickly and with truth. I have seen no woman yet with perfectly fulfills my notions of beauty. He burst out laughing violently. Upon my word, you are not wanting in audacity, he said. Nothing but perfect beauty will suit you, eh? But consider, my friend, you, though a good-looking, well-built man, are not yourself quite a Flavius Apollo. That has nothing to do with the matter, I rejoined. A man should choose a wife, a careful eye to his own personal gratification, in the same way that he chooses horses or wine, perfection or nothing. And the woman? Jimenez demanded, his eyes twinkling. The woman has no real right of choice, I responded, for this was my pet argument, and I took pleasure in setting it forth. She must mate wherever she has the chance of being properly maintained. A man is always a man, a woman is only a man's appendage, and without beauty she cannot put forth any just claim to his admiration or support. Right, very right, and logically argued, he exclaimed, becoming preternaturally serious in a moment. I myself have no sympathy with the new ideas that are in vogue concerning the intellectuality of women. She is simply the female of man. She has no real soul save that which is a reflex of his, and being destitute of logic, she is incapable of forming a correct opinion on any subject. All the imposture of religion is kept up by this unmathematical, hysterical creature. And it is a curious, considering how inferior a being she is, what mischief she has contrived to make the world, who as mere men should undoubtedly have mastered her. And in the present age, she is becoming more than ever unmanageable. It's only a passing phase, I returned carelessly. A fad got up a few unloved and unlovable types of the feminine sex. I care very little for women. I doubt whether I shall ever marry. Well, you have plenty of time to consider and amuse yourself with the fair ones in passant, he said, watching me narrowly. And in the meantime, I can take you round to the different marriage markets of the world, if you so choose, though the largest one of them all is, of course, in this very metropolis. Splendid bargains to be had. My dear friend, wonderful blonde and brunette specimens going really very cheap. We'll examine them at our leisure. I'm glad you have yourself decided that we are to be comrades, for I am proud. I may say damnably proud. And never stay any man's company when he expresses the slightest wish to be rid of me. Good night. Good night, I responded. We clasped hands, and they were still interlocked when a sudden flash of lightning blazed vividly across the room, followed instantaneously by a terrific clap of thunder. The electric lights went out, and the only glow of the fire illuminated our faces. I was a little startled and confused. The prince stood still, quite unconcerned, his eyes shining like those of a cat in the darkness. What a storm, he remarked lightly. Such thunder is rather unusual. Amael? The valet entered, his sinister countenance resembling a white mask made visible in the gloom. These lamps have gone out, said his master. It is very odd that civilized humanity has not yet learned the complete management of the electric light. Can you put them in order, Amael? Yes, Your Excellency. And in a few moments, by some dexterous manipulation which I did not understand and could not see, the crystal case jets shone forth again with renewed brilliancy. Another peal of thunder crashed overhead, followed by a downpour of rain. Really remarkable weather for January, said Ramirez, again giving me his hand. Good night, my friend. Sleep well. If the anger of the elements will permit, I returned, smiling. Oh, never mind the elements. Man has nearly mastered them, or soon will do so, now that he is getting gradually convinced there is no deity to interfere in his business. MIL, show Mr. Tempest to his room. MIL obeyed, and crossing the corridor, ushered me into a large, luxurious apartment richly furnished and lit up by the blaze of a bright fire. The comforting warmth shone welcome upon me as I entered, and I, who had not experienced such personal luxury since my boyhood days, felt more than ever overpowered by the jubilant sense of my sudden extraordinary good fortune. MIL waited respectfully now and then, furtively glancing at me with an expression which, to my fancy, had something derisive in it. Is there anything I can do for you, sir? He inquired. No, thank you, I answered, endeavoring to throw an accent of careless condescension into my voice, for somehow I felt this man must be kept strictly in his place. You have been very attentive. I shall not forget it. A slight smile flickered over his features. Much obliged to you, sir. Good night. And he retired, leaving me alone. I paced the room up and down more dreamily than consciously, trying to think, trying to set in order the amazing events of the day, but my brain was still dazed and confused, and the only image of actual prominence in my mind was the striking and remarkable personality of my new friend, Jimenez. His extraordinary good looks, his attractive manner, his curious cynicism, which was so oddly mixed with some deeper sentiment to which I could not give a name, all the trifling yet uncommon peculiarities of his bearing and humor haunted me and became indissolubly mingled, as it were, with myself and all the circumstances concerning me. I undressed before the fire, listening drowsily to the rain and the thunder which was now dying so into sullen echoes. Geoffrey Tempest, the world is before you, I said, apostrophizing myself indolently. You are a young man. You have health, a good appearance, and brains. Added to this, you now have 5 millions of money and a wealthy prince for your friend. What more do you want of fate or fortune? Nothing except fame. And that you will get easily, for nowadays even fame is purchasable, like love. Your star is in the ascendant. No more literary drudgery for you, my boy. Pleasure and profit and ease are yours to enjoy for the rest of your life. You are a lucky dog. At last you have your day. I flung myself upon the soft bed and settled myself to sleep, and as I dozed off, I still heard the rumble of heavy thunder in the distance. Once I fancied I heard the prince's voice calling, MIL, MIL, with a wildness resembling the shriek of an angry wind. And in another moment, I started violently from a profound slumber under the impression that someone had approached and was looking fixedly at me. I sat up in bed, peering into the darkness, for the fire had gone out. Then I turned on a small electric lamp at my side, which fully illuminated the room. There was no one there, yet my imagination played me such tricks before I could rest again, that I thought I heard a hissing whisper near me that said, Peace, trouble him not, let the fool in his folly sleep. And with that, my loves, I bid you good night. If you are enjoying The Gentleman Psychic, if you are enjoying story time, if you are enjoying my videos, a great way of saying thank you is through my Patreon, which is patreon.com/The Gentleman Psychic, or you can find me on PayPal at rlillard6@gmail.com, or you can find me on Venmo at Richard-Lael Lillard. And I really hope you are enjoying this. I'm loving it. I'm loving you. And be careful what you wish for. All right, my lovelies. Bonne nuit. Good night.